Hello, let's go over the artist investigation and creation homework assignment. So first of all, this is a discussion post, so you're going to want to have your essay portion or the responses to these prompts, and that should be about a minimum of 600 words. And I think that should be pretty easy to get to with the different prompts that I'm requiring you to consider. And then it's required that you respond to at least 2 of your classmates' posts, and those should be about a minimum of 75 words. And, use some of the terms and references that you've collected from all the information covered in this week's learning unit. That's really important. So be sure to use some of the language around composition, use some of the language around the different artists that we've discussed and your impression of what the student has submitted for this discussion post. So first you're going to want to pick one of the artists from this list here. We've got 14 artists to choose from. These artists were all covered in this week's learning unit. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to want to pick one of these artists, and then you're going to pick a photograph by one of these artists. And you'll want to embed that image into your discussion post. And you're going to want to include the name of the artwork, the name of the artist, the date, the size of the work, the medium, basically all the physical properties, so all the objective facts. And then you're going to create a visual response, a photograph. Of course, you can use your phone, you can use a digital camera, and your photograph that you create somehow needs to be inspired by the artist's work that you chose. It doesn't have to look exactly like the work, and you're going to talk about, later on I'll go over these prompts, you're going to talk about how your photograph really visually represents the artist and how you were inspired to make the photograph that you made from what you learned about the photographer and their work. So you could potentially choose the work of Ansel Adams, who did a lot of black and white portrait photographs of Yosemite. Doesn't mean you have to go to Yosemite and make pictures and convert them to black and white, or set your black and white setting on your phone or whatever device you're going to use. You can take a picture of something completely different, but just talk about how Ansel Adams inspired you. So basically for this assignment, you're going to want to upload one photograph by one of these artists, and then also a photograph that you made. Then you're going to apply the 4 types of investigation, the visual analysis, to both the photograph that you chose by the artist and the photograph that you made. And I'm going to go over that in more detail in just a second. So you're going to include, I would embed a photo, I would include the physical properties, then I would talk a little bit about the visual and formal structure, the identification of subject matter and conventional symbolism, the integration of cultural context, and so that could be all of the information about the photographer that you choose, let's say Ansel Adams. Then you're going to post your photograph and do the same for your work, where you're going to go ahead and give your work a title, a size, really take ownership in the same way that you have collected all the details for the photograph by one of these artists. Do the same thing for your photograph as well. After you've done that for both photographs, then the last 2 prompts would be to discuss your opinion of the photograph by the photographer you selected, if you feel their work is successful or not, and why you feel it visually communicates the artist's message. So you're going to pick one of these photographers and you're going to do some research. You're going to look up not only their work, but what are their ideas. So and I've talked a lot about, for example, Andreas Gursky and the ideas behind his work. I also talked about Anna Mai Lee and her ideas. And so Henri Cartier-Bresson is more of a photographer who really works with that idea of the decisive moment. So the concepts in his work might be just really utilizing the beauty of photography, composition, and design. And the messages might be just capturing that moment, right? So this idea of the artist's messages and intentions, each one of these artists might have a very different message and intention. Some of it might be more conceptual, and some of them might be more about the moment. And then also include in your essay how and why you feel the photograph you submitted is inspired by the photographer and the photography by that photographer that you chose. So I hope that makes sense. All right, let's go over some more information. So I picked the sample artist of Andreas Gursky, and of course you're going to want to include all the physical properties, so the name of the artist, the name of the artwork when it was made, the size, the medium. If you can find out how they made it, that's great. If you can't, that's fine. And then its function in this particular homework assignment is its fine art photography. So after you've done this, you'll also want to go back and include all of the other visual analysis pieces. So you'll want to use this process to visually analyze their work. So then you'll talk about the composition, the visual and formal structure, the subject matter, and symbolism, which I've talked about in the, there's videos and in the lecture, and then also a little bit about Andreas Gursky if you chose him. And so telling us, maybe where he's from and what his ideas are, how your interpretation of what you learned shows his interest of our culture. And then you'll move on to your own photograph. And again, you'll include your name, give your artwork a title, when you made it. You can imagine the size that you would want to make your artwork. So maybe envision making your artwork really big. So this photograph, this in particular photograph, I sold to a client, and we made a huge image for their house. It was fantastic. So maybe you want to decide to have your image really small or really large, but you can decide the size of your artwork. And then you'll also include the medium. So yours might just be a digital color print, and the technique. You might put down that you've photographed it with your phone, or maybe you use a digital camera. And then what genre it might go into. So fine art photography, documentary photography, landscape photography, all that kind of stuff. And then you'll move on. And again, you're doing this for both the photograph that you chose by the photographer and also your photograph. So you'll apply the second type of investigation and talk a little bit about the visual elements. So the vocabulary that we've been going over, talk about the composition, the quality of light, saturation, different concepts around really kind of visually investigating the formal elements, the structure. And then you'll move on, and again, like you'll be doing this for the photographer's work and your work. And you'll talk about the subject matter and the conventional symbolism or what you think it means, right? And so I've included here 2 short paragraphs just talking about my own photograph, which is what you'll be doing, and the symbolism that I was exploring with my work. So again, these will be your words, but take the time to provide for myself and your classmates what your ideas around the symbolism of your photograph were. If there was ideas of symbolism, you might have been more responding to the moment, and you can talk about that as well. And then finally, you'll apply the 4 types of investigation. And so here, you'll apply the cultural context. And so the cultural context will be looking at, where do you live? How your life might influence, and the choices that you make in your life, the images that you made and that you're sharing with us, the image that you made, the photograph. So I've just included a short bio so you can do the same. You can just kind of talk about where you're going to school and what you do for a living, whatever you want to include here that would give us kind of an idea of you. And then you also might include your ideas about what the photograph means, kind of beyond the symbolism, but just like why you took it. And so that's what I've written here. And so you can read this as well on your own time. So I hope that you find this assignment interesting because you're going to be applying the process, that we've talked about before. So you're going to be visually analyzing both a photograph by one of these photographers and the photograph that you made. So I hope this makes sense. Keep me posted with any questions. Thanks.